Afternoon, everyone. Oh, I'm so happy that today I'm back again to share with you the basic conditions of employment. Why do we have to discuss the basic conditions of employment? It's because of each and every employer has to have the basic conditions of employment on their walls. Not all walls though. They might choose from their HR office. They would put the basic conditions of employment, or it can be in their intranet where all the employees are able to access, because they need to be accessible to everyone. Any person that wants to refer, they can then go back and check whether whatever that they are doing, it's not contravening the basic conditions of employment. So I'm going to start with the ordinary hours of work. Everyone needs to know that the hours of work are regulated. Anything outside the regulated hours, then it means there has to be an agreement to that. It can't be a unilateral agreement. It has to be all the parties that are going to be affected by the hours. So the ordinary hours, according to the basic conditions of Employment Act, it states that per week you need to work 45 hours. And then it says again 9 hours in any day if an employee works for 5 days or fewer in a week. Or you can work 8 days in any day if the employee works on more than 5 days in a week. So this says when you're working more than 5 days in a week, then you are entitled to work 8 hours. However, when you are only working for a week or 5 days, let's say 5 days or fewer days, then you can work 9 hours. And then the other thing, let's discuss the overtime. People need to know that overtime, again, the employer and the employee needs to come into an agreement. It cannot be a unilateral decision. It has to be the parties that are going to be involved. An employer cannot just come to you and say, hey, come and work overtime, without you agreeing to it. So this is what the Act says regarding overtime. It says when you are working overtime, it has to be 3 hours of overtime on top of your hours that you normally work. And then it says 10 hours of overtime a week, meaning you get 3 hours, and if you are working the whole week, then it means it cannot exceed 10 hours overtime in a week. And it further states that an employer must pay an employee at least 1.5 times the employee's wage of overtime worked. And it further states that an agreement may provide for an employer. You understand? It says an agreement. It doesn't say the employer can just inform you without an agreement. When it comes to an overtime, it means there has to be an agreement. In most cases, there will be collective agreement, which it's not an employee per se, that would sign for it. The shop stewards would be the one that would be signing for that collective agreement. And it says, agreement may provide for an employer to pay an employee not less than the employer's ordinary wage for overtime worked, and grant the employee at least 30 minutes time off on full pay for every hour of overtime worked. And then again, it further states that the employer has to provide or grant an employee at least 90 minutes paid off for each hour of overtime worked. And I assume most of the people that work overtime, they need to understand what this means. And I know that those that are not working in factories, those that are working in offices, maybe they do understand. But for those that don't understand, please, you are welcome to comment, you are welcome to ask questions, you are welcome to contact me so that I can actually clarify to you. Now, let's talk about meals, lunch hour. People need to know that it's not a favor to take your lunch. It is regulated by the basic conditions of employment. An employer has to grant you lunchtime, and that lunchtime has to be paid for. It's not free. Now, what does the Act says about it? It says an employer must give an employee who works continuously for more than 5 hours a meal interval, which would be the lunch, at least 1 continuous hour. So employees need to know that according to the basic conditions of employment, an hour is allocated for lunch, not 20 minutes. Unless you agree with your employer that you want to work 20 minutes so that you can leave early. However, you have to work your hour. But other places, they divide the hour. There would be the 30 minutes, being the 30 minutes that you take your lunch, and then before lunch, as you see our courts, you'll see that there's a 15 minutes that they take before lunch, and then there's an hour, because normally we take an hour for lunch. Then if they've taken an hour, then there's no need for another additional 15 minutes. But you might find in other places they do take the 15 minutes again after lunch hour. So that is regulated. You can decide on dividing your 60 minutes in according to the 15 minutes which you would utilize it for your tea, which you would utilize it, I'm not quite sure the other one, what would it be called, but it's regulated. So you are to take your lunch, and it has to be 60 minutes. And then it further says an employee must be paid for lunch for a meal interval in which the employee is required to work or is required to be available for work. And then it says again, for any portion of a meal interval that is in excess of 75 minutes, unless the employee lives on the premises at which the workplace is situated. Now let's go to pay for Sundays. Sundays is not a public holiday, but there are other people that work on Sunday. What does the Act says? The Act says an employer must pay an employee who works on a Sunday at double the employee's wage for each hour worked. Meaning if you work on a Sunday, then you are entitled to double pay of your wage for each hour that you have worked. Unless, it does say, unless the employee ordinarily works on a Sunday, in which case the employer must pay the employee at 1.5 times the employee's wage for each hour worked. Now you understand, especially the ones that are working in restaurants. I think because they work on Sundays. The ones that are working in retail shops, they work on Sundays. So the double wage doesn't apply to them. It only applies to those that it's not what they normally do working on Sundays. Now let's go to night work. We do have those that work night shift, and it states that night shift starts at 6 in the evening and it ends before 6 the next day. And it states that an employer may only require or permit an employee to perform night work if so agreed. Then this means that there has to be an agreement that you work at night. But you've got all the like those that are working for security, you find that they change. This week they work day shift, the other week they work night shift. Surely there is an agreement to that. And it further says the employee is compensated by the payment of an allowance. So it means when you work night work, then there has to be an allowance, which may be a shift allowance. So those that are working shift night work, I think you should go and check whether you are being given that night allowance. Or by a reduction of working hours. It says then if they don't pay you, then they can reduce your working hours. So you can go and verify that information. And then at the same time it says transportation is available between the employee's place of residence and the workplace at the commencement and conclusion of the employee shift. So it means the employer has to make sure that there is transportation for the employees who are going to be working night work, night shift. Let's go to, so if you don't have that information, please try and find out whether your employer is actually contravening the basic conditions of employment or not. Then we have public holidays. In this case, it says an employer may not require an employee to work on a public holiday, except in accordance with an agreement. Again, there has to be an agreement. If a public holiday falls on a day on which an employee would ordinarily work, then an employer must pay an employee who does not work on the public holiday at least the wage that the employee would have ordinarily have received for work on that day. Now it says at least double the amount referred to in, well, I would say in paragraph A, where you are to be paid at least the wage that the employee would ordinarily. Then it means you'll have to get double pay. And then it further says, if it is greater, the amount referred in paragraph A plus the amount earned by the employee for the time worked on that day. So it means you get your ordinary hours, day pay, and an additional payment on the hours that you've worked. Let's come to annual leave. According to the basic conditions, or according to this act, it says annual leave cycle means the period of 12 months employment with the same employer. So it means you have to be in the employ for 12 months to be able to get your annual leave. And it says an employee's commencement of employment and the completion of that employee's prior leave cycle. An employer must grant an employee at least 21 days, consecutive days of annual leave on full remuneration. So your 21 days, you have to get full remuneration in respect of each annual leave. Then it further states, by agreement, 1 day of annual leave on full remuneration for every 17 days on which the employee worked or was entitled to be paid. I think this is clear. Most people know that the annual leave, you only get annual leave when you've already worked for a company for 12 months and you get your 21 days of annual leave. And most people know that you don't have to take the 21 days at once. You can actually take it regularly or often, different months, different days. You can utilize your annual leave as you wish. However, you need to know that you have to make sure that you utilize your 21 days. Before, people would not use their 21 days so that they can be able to get to sell it to the employer and be paid. However, most companies and organizations, they've stopped that. Now you have to take your annual leave. Sometimes you'll hear you calling a government department and they tell you, no, the person is on leave. And it's a long leave. It's because of those days that they did not utilize. They were forced to actually take those leave days because the employer is not willing to pay them. Sick leave, we all know about sick leave. The only thing that you need to know is that with sick leave, you have sick leave cycle means the period of 36 months employment with the same employer, and an employee commencement of employment or the completion of that employee prior sick leave cycle. And it says during every sick leave cycle, an employee is entitled to an amount of paid sick leave equal to the number of days the employee would normally work during a period of 6 weeks. And it further says during the employee's first sick leave cycle, an employer may reduce the employee's entitlement to sick leave in terms of, I'm not going to, well, it's subsection, which is during every sick leave cycle, by the number of days sick leave taken in terms of section 3, which we've already dealt with that. Now, people need to understand that sick leave is meant for sick leave. But however, you find that people use sick leave for their other personal things. Unfortunately, if you get caught, you will be dismissed. Most people, they don't know, but if you utilize your sick leave for something else other than what you've taken it for, unfortunately, you will be dismissed. Now let's talk about maternity leave. When it comes to maternity leave, people need to know that you are entitled to take maternity leave, and you are given 4 months for that. The unfortunate thing is that during that period where you are at home, you will not be paid by the employer. You will be paid by UIF. And in most cases, what we've observed is that you need to make sure that you prepare your papers early. Because if you don't do that, you might stay that 4 months without any money coming in, especially when the employer is not going to be paying you. Because we've had situations where people went on maternity leave, UIF delayed to pay them while they were at home. And let me tell you, if you are used to salary, it is very challenging. So before you even go on maternity leave, complete all the necessary forms so that by the time you go to your maternity leave, at least the waiting period is shortened. You don't get frustrated by not receiving anything. So people need to know that. I know those that have been on maternity leave, they know very well the challenges that come with maternity leave. Now we have family responsibility. Before I go to that, now we know that even our male are allowed, or the father of the minor child that will be born, to take maternity leave, and they are given 5 days for that. I still want to hear whether there's any person that has actually taken the 5 days and used it specifically for being in maternity leave, looking after the newborn. I would really like to hear that. Then we have family responsibility leave. Most people, I think those that are working for government, they know about the family responsibility leave, because government employees, they do take their leave. Us who are to be served by government, we are always told, no, they are, So we know that government, they know their leave days. Whatever leave day that is available for them, they're making sure that they take their leave. So there is family responsibility whereby when there's death in the family, you can take that, or whereby a child is being born, you can take that maternity leave, or where your child is sick, you can take maternity leave, or where there's death of your spouse or life partner, you can take the maternity leave, or if it's your parents, adoptive parents, grandparents, child, adopted child, grandchild, or siblings, you can take that family responsibility leave. I hope the above will actually assist you, and please know that during that time the employer will pay you your full amount, your full salary, let me put it that way, for that family responsibility. The same with the maternity leave, not for the one that is actually going to be giving birth though. I would assume the one that has been given 5 days, yeah, I would assume the 5 days for the father of the newborn. I'm not quite sure whether they would deduct that amount, or would they be paid their full salary. That we can investigate. Thank you very much for listening to this channel. Thank you very much. Please don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like, comment. Thank you. Love you. Have a blessed weekend. Bye.